There is something powerful about a beginning that feels uncertain, a beginning that doesn't look like the start of a great story, a beginning where the odds are not in your favor, where your name isn't known, where your future is unclear. That kind of beginning might seem like a disadvantage, but it can also become the strongest foundation for greatness. Because when someone rises from a humble start, from a place where little is expected of them, their journey becomes more than just success. It becomes inspiration. The person in this story was born far from fame. No one expected anything remarkable. There were no bright lights, no headlines, no golden pathway laid out in front of him. He came from a mixed background, raised by a young mother and grandparents who did their best, but who faced many of the same struggles that millions of families know around the world. Life wasn't about luxury. It was about learning how to adapt, how to understand different cultures, how to live with questions that didn't always have clear answers. He didn't grow up surrounded by wealth or privilege. In fact, he was often surrounded by doubt, not just from others, but sometimes from within. Imagine being a child who looks different, whose name is unusual, who doesn't always feel like he belongs. That experience could easily break someone's confidence. But in this case, it became fuel. Instead of falling into frustration, he chose to observe, to read, to ask, to listen. From a young age, he was learning something most people never realize, that your beginning does not define your ending. Every step in his early life could have led to a quiet, invisible adulthood, but the difference was in his mindset. He believed in the power of learning. He believed in the idea that no matter where you come from, you can grow into someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who has something to offer the world. That belief wasn't loud. It wasn't about showing off or pretending to be more than he was. It was quiet but strong. It was the kind of belief that says, I don't know everything yet, but I will learn, I will work, I will rise. Education became his path forward. Books became his closest friends. In classrooms and libraries, he found something that changed him, not just knowledge, but vision. He started to see what was possible beyond his neighborhood, beyond his circumstances, beyond what anyone had told him. And yet, even as he started to rise, he didn't forget where he came from. That humble beginning gave him something that money can't buy, perspective, because he never took anything for granted. Every achievement was earned. Every opportunity was appreciated, and every person he met, no matter how rich or poor, he treated with respect. That's what growing up with less can give you, the understanding that every person's story matters. That no one is above or beneath you. That leadership is not about standing on a stage, but about standing beside people, listening to them, learning from them, and lifting them up when they need help. This man's humble beginnings gave him empathy, and empathy became his strength. While others chased power, he focused on people. While others focused on appearance, he focused on understanding. And as he grew older, that early humility didn't fade, it deepened. It became the reason people trusted him. It became the reason people listened, because when someone speaks not from a place of pride, but from a place of shared struggle, their words hit harder. They mean more. His story teaches us that greatness does not require a perfect start. It doesn't require famous parents, big cities, or endless resources. It starts in small homes, in quiet moments, in simple decisions. It starts when a young person decides to keep going, to keep trying, to keep learning even when no one else is watching. It starts when someone dares to believe that their voice matters, even if it shakes at first. Today, many people look at successful individuals and assume they've always had it together. But that's almost never true. The strongest people usually come from the hardest places. The clearest voices usually come from the quietest rooms. And the most impactful lives often begin in the most unexpected ways. If you ever feel like your background holds you back, remember this story. Remember that where you start may shape you, but it does not have to define you. You can come from a place of struggle and grow into a symbol of strength. You can come from silence and become a voice of hope. You can come from doubt and still lead others with confidence and care. Your humble beginning is not your weakness. It's your secret power. And if you choose to rise, not in spite of it, but because of it, then your future has no limits. There is a force in this world more powerful than money, more lasting than fame, and more life-changing than luck. That force is education, not just the kind you get in a classroom, but the kind that opens your mind, stretches your thinking, and teaches you to ask, to wonder, to grow. For the man in this story, education was not just a tool, it was a lifeline. It was the bridge between a life of confusion and a life of purpose. It helped him move from uncertainty to clarity, from isolation to leadership. When he was young, he didn't always feel like he belonged. He moved between different cultures, different homes, different ways of living. It was hard to feel rooted. It was hard to feel like he truly fit in anywhere. But through all the changes, there was one constant learning. Wherever he went, he found comfort in books. Books didn't judge him. Books didn't care about how he looked or where he came from. Books welcomed him, challenged him, and made him feel seen. And through reading, he started to understand not only the world, but also himself. He began to realize that learning could unlock a future far beyond what he could see at that moment. It could take him places his feet had never been. It could teach him to speak with confidence, to think critically, to imagine solutions instead of just seeing problems. He wasn't just collecting facts, he was building character. With every class, every teacher, every new idea, he became more certain that knowledge had the power to change not just his life, but the lives of others too. But it wasn't always easy. Education wasn't handed to him on a silver tray. He had to work hard for it. He had to wake up early, study late, and stay focused even when things got tough. There were moments of doubt. There were moments when he felt like giving up. But something inside him said, "Keep going." And that voice, quiet but firm, helped him push through. Through school and university, he met people who inspired him. He listened to professors who challenged him to think beyond himself. He read stories of leaders, activists, writers, and dreamers who had used education as their weapon to fight injustice and bring hope. And in those stories he saw possibility. He saw that knowledge is not just about personal success. It's about service. It's about lifting others up. It's about using what you know to make things better. That belief became the foundation of his life. Education didn't just give him degrees, it gave him direction. It gave him a reason to speak up, a reason to organize, a reason to help. He didn't want to learn just for himself. He wanted to use what he learned to improve the lives of people who were hurting, struggling, and forgotten. He didn't see knowledge as something to keep, he saw it as something to share. In time, he began to teach others not as a professor, but as a leader. His words had power because they came from experience. People could feel that he wasn't speaking from a script. He was speaking from what he had lived, read, and understood. And the more he shared what he had learned, the more others began to believe in themselves. That's what education can do. It doesn't just light up one life, it lights the way for many. Even at the highest levels of his career, he never forgot the value of learning. He never stopped reading. Never stopped asking questions, never stopped surrounding himself with people who could challenge his thinking and help him grow, because he knew something important. True leaders are always students first. The moment you stop learning is the moment you stop leading. His story is proof that education can take you further than anyone expects. It can lift you from a quiet childhood into a powerful voice for justice. It can take you from the back of the classroom to the front of history, and it can turn the pages of a book into the steps of a journey that changes the world. So if you're holding a book in your hand today, or learning a new word, or struggling to understand something difficult, don't give up. Every small lesson matters. Every minute you spend learning is a step toward a future you cannot yet see, but one that is already being built. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep growing. Education changed his life. It gave him power, not the kind that controls people, but the kind that connects them. And if it changed his life, it can change yours too. When you don't know exactly who you are, where you belong, or how the world sees you, it can feel like you're lost in a fog. For many, identity is a clear picture, a set of traditions, roots, and familiar paths. But for others, identity feels like a puzzle with missing pieces. That was the case for the man in this story. From an early age, he was asking deep questions. Who am I? Where do I fit in? How do I connect the different parts of myself? These weren't easy questions, and the answers didn't come quickly. But through the struggle, something powerful began to take shape, a deeper sense of purpose. He was born between two worlds, two cultures, two races, two countries. In one place he looked different. In another he sounded different. No matter where he stood, he often felt like an outsider looking in. That kind of experience can break someone's confidence. It can lead to silence, to shame, to the feeling of never being enough. But for him, it planted a seed. It made him curious. It made him want to understand not only himself, but also others who felt the same way. As he grew up, that inner tension didn't fade, it evolved. He asked more questions. He looked for answers in books, in conversations, and in quiet reflection. He wasn't searching for a single label or a simple definition of identity. He was searching for connection. He wanted to understand how the different parts of his life, his background, his experiences, his values could come together into something whole. There were moments when he tried to fit in by changing parts of himself. He adapted. He learned to move between spaces, to blend in where he could. But no matter how much he adjusted, he always felt the pull of something deeper, the need to embrace his full self, not just the version others expected. That realization didn't happen overnight. It came through struggle, through painful moments, through being misunderstood and overlooked. But eventually it became clear his identity was not a weakness. It was his strength. He began to see that his mixed heritage, his global experiences, and his emotional depth gave him a unique lens. He could see the world through multiple perspectives. He could understand people from different backgrounds. He could speak in ways that reached across lines of race, culture, class, and geography. And slowly, he began to use that ability, not just to find peace within himself, but to help others find belonging too. That's the beautiful irony of identity struggle. The pain of not belonging can teach you how to make others feel included. The feeling of being on the outside can train your heart to bring others in. And that's exactly what he did. As he stepped into leadership, he didn't pretend to have all the answers. He didn't deny the complexity of who he was. Instead, he used that complexity as a bridge, a way to connect with people who had also felt unseen or unheard. He spoke about race not from theory but from experience. He spoke about unity not as a dream but as a necessity born from his own life. People listened because he was honest. He wasn't hiding behind a mask. He wasn't pretending to be perfect. He was showing what it looked like to wrestle with questions and to keep growing in the process. That kind of leadership is rare. It comes from pain, from reflection, from patience. It comes from being willing to sit in discomfort long enough to understand it, and then to turn it into purpose. He didn't let his confusion define him. He let it refine him. Every part of his story, even the hard parts, became part of his message. And the result, people felt seen. Young people who looked like him, or who didn't look like him at all but felt the same confusion, saw a reflection of their own story in his. He showed them that you don't have to have all the answers to make a difference. You don't have to fit perfectly into one box to lead with authenticity. You can be a work in progress and still be a force for change. His identity wasn't a limitation. It was a map. It led him through struggle into empathy, into connection, into service. And eventually it led him to his purpose. Not a purpose written by others, but one shaped by his own hands, his own voice, and his own journey. So if you ever feel unsure of who you are or where you belong, remember this. Your questions are not signs of weakness. They are the beginning of strength. Your identity is not something you have to figure out all at once. It is something you build layer by layer through honesty, curiosity, and courage. And sometimes the very thing you once felt unsure about becomes the key to helping others find their way too. Leadership is a word that often gets confused with authority. Many think that to be a leader, you must be the loudest voice, the person at the front, the one with the title, the suit, or the spotlight. But real leadership isn't about commanding attention, it's about giving it. It's not about being in control, it's about being in service. And that's the kind of leadership this story shows us. The quiet, determined people, first kind that changes lives from the ground up, not the top down. This man did not chase leadership for recognition. He did not rise because he craved power. He rose because he listened. He saw struggle, and he showed up. He saw injustice, and he spoke up. He saw ordinary people being overlooked, and he stood beside them, not above them. That's where his leadership was born, not in a boardroom, not in a campaign, but in neighborhoods, in classrooms, in community meetings where voices often go unheard. He believed that to lead people, you have to care about them. Not just in words, but in actions. He walked the streets of poor communities. He sat with families who had lost hope. He taught, organized, learned names, heard stories, and carried those stories with him. He didn't ask, "How can I get more power?" He asked, "How can I help?" That question became his compass. As he stepped into more public roles, he didn't change that mindset, he amplified it. He didn't stand on stages just to impress crowds. He stood there because he believed he had a duty to represent people whose voices had never reached that far. He wasn't interested in leadership that separated him from others. He was interested in leadership that brought people together across race, class, age, and belief. And he knew the only way to build that kind of unity was through humility and service. Service is not glamorous. It's not always exciting. Sometimes it means long hours, hard decisions, and very little thanks. But he embraced that reality because real leadership means sacrifice. It means listening more than talking. It means being willing to take the blame when things go wrong and share the credit when things go right. And he did that over and over again. People trusted him not because he claimed to be perfect, but because he was present. He showed up. He told the truth even when it was uncomfortable. He admitted when he didn't know something. He wasn't trying to be a hero, he was trying to be useful. That's why people followed him, not because they were told to, but because they saw something real. He also understood something deeper, that leadership is not about one person at the top. It's about unlocking leadership in others. He didn't just want followers, he wanted citizens. He wanted young people to see that their voices mattered. He wanted communities to feel their power. He wanted people to stop waiting for someone else to solve their problems and realize that they had the power to act, to vote, to organize, to lead. His greatest legacy isn't just what he achieved, it's what he inspired others to believe they could achieve too. He reminded the world that leadership can be kind, that it can be thoughtful, that it can be honest, compassionate, and inclusive. And he did all of that by staying rooted in one core truth. You lead best when you serve first. Even at the highest points of his journey, when the cameras were always on, when the pressure was immense, he kept coming back to that truth. He didn't just talk about unity, he tried to live it. He didn't just call for change, he worked for it, piece by piece, policy by policy, heart by heart. And through all of it, he never forgot the people he was there to serve. His story teaches us something that is both simple and powerful. Leadership isn't about being the best. It's about bringing out the best in others. It's not about how many people listen to you. It's about how many people you choose to listen to. And it's not about power over people. It's about responsibility to people. In today's world, where leadership is often measured in followers, fame, and force, his example stands out. It reminds us that the strongest leaders are not those who lift themselves up, but those who lift others, the ones who ask, "How can I help you succeed?" instead of, "How can you help me look good?" So if you want to lead, whether it's in your school, your job, your community, or your family, start by serving. Start by caring. Start by listening. That's where real leadership begins. That's how change begins. Hope, it's a word we hear so often that sometimes we forget how powerful it really is. People use it in speeches, in songs, in everyday conversations. But for the man in this story, hope wasn't just a word. It wasn't just a catchy slogan or a way to win hearts. Hope, for him, was a tool, something to be used, something to be built, something that could break through walls of despair and help shape a better world. There were many moments in his life when the world around him didn't look hopeful. He saw poverty up close. He saw racism, division, and fear. He saw communities that had been abandoned and promises that had been broken. He heard the stories of working people who were trying their best and still coming up short. He listened to young people who had big dreams but no clear path to reach them. And yet, in all of that, in the face of hardship, confusion, and injustice, he chose hope. Not blind hope, not wishful thinking, but a hope grounded in action. He believed that hope was not pretending things are fine when they're not. Hope was believing that things can get better if we work for it together. He once said that the audacity of hope is what allows people to keep going even when everything tells them to stop. That kind of hope is not soft. It's not naive, it's brave. He carried that hope with him through every chapter of his life. When doors were closed, he kept knocking. When people said you can't, he said why not. When voices told him to wait, to give up, to be quiet, he chose to keep speaking, keep moving, keep organizing. Not because he knew everything would work out, but because he believed that hope gives us a reason to try. Hope is not about ignoring reality. It's about facing reality with courage. It's about understanding that while the road ahead may be long and uneven, we don't walk it alone. He never saw hope as a solo emotion, he saw it as a collective force. Something that builds when people come together, when they show up to vote, when they stand up for one another, when they refuse to let cynicism take control. Even in the most challenging times during crises, setbacks, and moments of national division, he held on to that belief. Not because he was always confident, but because he understood that leaders have a responsibility to protect people's belief in what's possible. A leader's job is not just to solve problems. It's also to remind people that they have the power to be part of the solution. That's why hope was central to everything he did. Because he knew that if people lose hope, they stop caring. And when people stop caring, injustice wins. So he spoke in a way that made people believe again. Believe in their country, believe in each other, believe in themselves. He didn't offer hope as a guarantee. He offered it as a starting point, a spark. He encouraged people not just to believe in change, but to become the ones who make it happen. That's what made his message so different. He never asked people to just believe in him. He asked them to believe in themselves and in the idea that together they could do things that once seemed impossible. And they did. His story, and the stories of those who walked with him, proved that hope can turn into history. That the most powerful movements don't start with certainty, they start with faith. Faith that a better future is worth fighting for, that every voice matters, that tomorrow can be brighter if we're willing to put in the work today. But even after reaching the highest office in the land, he didn't stop talking about hope, because he knew that hope is not something you win and hold on to forever. It's something you have to keep choosing over and over again, especially when it's hard, especially when progress is slow, especially when the world feels like it's moving backwards. In those moments, hope becomes more important, not less. His life reminds us that real hope is not passive. It's active, it's disciplined, it's strategic. It's the fire that keeps communities organizing when no one's watching. It's the voice that says, keep going, when others say, give up. It's what drives change, makers, teachers, workers, and dreamers to keep pushing forward, even when the odds seem stacked against them. So when you hear the word hope, don't just think of it as a nice feeling. Think of it as a tool like a hammer in your hand, something you can build with, something you can shape your life with, something that allows you to take pain and turn it into purpose, because hope doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to all of us, and when we use it not just to dream, but to act, we create the kind of world that once seemed out of reach. There's a powerful truth that too often gets buried beneath the noise of politics, power, and performance. Every voice matters. Not just the famous ones, not just the loudest, not just the ones with titles or microphones. Every voice, including yours, has weight, has value, has the ability to shape the world in ways that might not always be seen immediately, but are deeply felt over time. In the story of this remarkable man, this principle was not just a belief, it was a way of living. He didn't come from wealth or dynasty. He didn't have powerful connections growing up. But what he did have was a belief that his voice mattered and that others' voices did too. He saw how too many people had been told that their opinion didn't count, that their story wasn't important, that their dreams were too small, their skin too dark, their background too broken, and he refused to accept that lie. From the beginning of his journey, he sought out the unheard, the forgotten, the overlooked. He went into neighborhoods where people had stopped voting because they thought it didn't matter. He sat in living rooms and school gyms and church basements, listening to ordinary people talk about extraordinary paying jobs lost, opportunities denied, systems that failed them over and over again. And instead of just nodding politely, he made a decision. Their voices would be his mission. When he stood up to speak, he wasn't just telling his own story, he was telling theirs. He understood something many people in power forget. When people feel heard, they start to believe they matter. And when they believe they matter, they show up, they speak out, they get involved, they begin to shape their world rather than just survive in it. He encouraged young people to vote not because it would help him win, but because it would help them realize their power. He pushed people to tell their stories not just for sympathy, but for strength. He reminded the nation that democracy isn't something that trickles down from the top. It rises up from the people, from their voices, from their engagement, from their willingness to participate in shaping the future. Even at the height of his influence, he never stopped listening. He hosted town halls, read letters from citizens every night, and kept asking the same question. What are people going through, and what do they need? That humility, that willingness to learn from the people made his leadership feel different. It wasn't distant, it was grounded, it was human. He also knew that every voice didn't always agree, and that was okay. In fact, it was necessary. He didn't want silence or obedience, he wanted conversation. Debate, progress built through understanding, not dominance, because when people speak, when they really speak, they invite connection. They invite change, but he also knew that voices can be silenced in more than one way. Not just by law, but by discouragement, by systems that make participation harder, by cultures that say, you don't belong here. And he fought against those barriers. Not because he wanted to be everyone's hero, but because he knew that the moment people stop believing their voice counts is the moment democracy begins to die. His story is proof that one voice can start a movement. But more than that, it's proof that real power comes when voices unite, when one becomes many, when silence turns to speech, when fear turns into action, and it doesn't take a title or a campaign or a stage to make that happen. It just takes the courage to speak up, to raise your hand, to share your story, to vote, to teach, to build, to challenge. You might be thinking your voice is too small, that no one's listening, that your opinion doesn't count in a world this big, this noisy. But remember this, the most powerful changes in history didn't begin with a crowd. They began with someone daring to say something when it was easier to stay silent. The man in this story didn't just tell people they mattered. He showed them, and now it's your turn to believe it and to live like it's true. Your voice matters in your home, in your school, in your community, online, at the ballot box, at your job, in your art. In your truth, and when you use it not just to speak, but to lift others up, you create a ripple effect that carries farther than you can see. So speak, share, act, because someone is waiting to hear a voice like yours. And when you use it fully, fearlessly, with purpose, you become part of a story far greater than yourself.